Hello and welcome once again to Tom's Hit Parade. It's time for the big one. Well, it's a couple weeks past time for the big one, but well, this is when I got around to it. My favorite albums of 2017. It's always a little aggravating putting this list together, but I guess that's a good thing because that just means there was so much good music out there. And this year was no exception. I actually, to confess, I recorded this last week, but when it was done, I really wasn't feeling it. I kind of powered through it because I recorded another video at the same time. But also, in the time since, I've had a chance to re-listen to some of the albums, and, well, let's just say the list changed quite a bit. And this list will be missing some of the things that are on a lot of other YouTubers' lists, partly because, well, this is a hobby and I have a day job, so I don't have a lot of time or money or the inclination to even think about other artists that I'm just not interested in or haven't had the time yet to explore. So, well, this list is what it is. I know my tastes run a little more mainstream probably than a lot of other YouTubers out there, but hopefully I will tune you into and maybe turn you on to some stuff that you haven't heard before. So, well, without further ado, let's get into the list. Starting off the list at number 25 is a great fusion band that fuses rock and EDM. I got into them with their first album, and then I kind of lost interest in them. They fell off my radar for, 10 years or so, until I heard their CDs playing in a record store and realized how much I'd missed them. And their new album is pretty good. It just didn't quite latch onto me like I was hoping it would. But still, it's a very good album. Plenty of good songs on here. Play Dead by Mute Math is my number 25 favorite album of the year. Number 24, kind of the same thing. I like both of these groups, individually, and they made a good album here, but, well, neither of them really got to shine like they normally do on their individual projects. And plus, the album was made up almost entirely of cover songs, which, it kind of makes it a little bit less special when it's not their own material. The Isley Brothers and Santana with The Power of Peace. Still a good album, number 24 on my countdown, but, not truly golden like maybe they should be. Santana's guitar work just doesn't quite have a chance, as I said, to really come out like we know he can, like we know it can. So on to number 23, and I'm moving through the bottom part of my list a little faster. I'm hoping to make this video in one part rather than in two parts like my last top albums countdown was a few years back. Number 23, I didn't know about this album until I saw it on the racks, and I whipped out my smartphone and looked them up, and as soon as I found out who these guys were, I had to pick up the album, and I wasn't disappointed. Unlike their parent group, these guys don't do straight a cappella. That's full pop, pop with full instrumental backing. Mitch Grassi and Scott Hoying of Pentatonics are Superfruit with their album Future Friends. My number 23 favorite album of the year. Now, number 22, I really wanted to put this guy a lot higher. I found out about this album. I found out that this album was in the works back in, May or April, thanks to CBS Sunday Morning. And then I went looking for it and I did not see a trace of it online until September, right before it came out. And this is one of my all-time favorite vocalists. But, well, I have a bone to pick with the producer Babyface. You don't put auto-tune or artificial vibrato on Johnny Mathis's voice. I mean, it's just too good for that. Johnny Mathis sings the great New American Songbook. And a couple of the song choices on here were another reason that it just wasn't what I expected. And with Johnny Mathis, I have my expectations pretty high to begin with. So, but one or two inspiring song choices actually. "Say Something" by A Great Big World. That actually is a really good fit for Johnny Mathis, and I was kind of surprised by it. But yeah, "Just the Way You Are." That's by Bruno Mars. That was pretty good. And one of the odder choices, though, Happy by Pharrell Williams. It's just not a good fit for Johnny Mathis. I just didn't agree with that. So, yeah, good album, but it could have been a lot better. That's why it didn't even crack my top 20. Sorry, Johnny. Love you, but, well, you know. On to number 21. This group, I enjoy. I loved their debut album. Their second album wasn't as great, but you know, that kind of couldn't be helped as excellent as their first album was. And it actually took me a while to pick up this album. But I realized there were a couple of good songs on it, the couple of big radio hits that they had. It kind of pulled me back in, and yeah, Evolve by Imagine Dragons is my number 21 favorite album. The song Start Over is a really good one that has not gotten a lot of attention. So yeah, check that one out, definitely. On into the top 20. This was a group that I didn't hear about until I heard about them in an email newsletter from my local record store. It clued me into them. And this is great, kind of a folky, acoustic rock sort of stuff. Good for like a Sunday afternoon when you're just kind of kicking back and relaxing. The Accidentals with their album Odyssey. That is my number 20 favorite album. They kind of remind me a little bit of Edie Brickell, sort of. Stitches and Seams and Earthbound are a couple of the really good songs on this album. Number 19. This guy, I haven't bought an album of his in 11 years. And I'm really glad that I stepped back in. He put out a couple of more gospel slanted albums, which that kind of turned me off of him for a while. And when I picked up this album and listened to it, it reminded me how much I missed him. And he's just got this growly voice that's just born for the blues. Signs by Johnny Lang is my number 19 favorite album of the year. Plenty of good songs on here. Last Man Standing is probably my favorite one. Snakes is another one. Bitter End, that's a good message song. I mean, he's good with the message songs, and this one doesn't totally move away from the gospel, but it's definitely not preachy at all. It's just a really good blues rock album. The only thing about it is his guitar work doesn't quite get the chance to really come to the forefront. I mean, he's great with the guitar, but just that voice, yeah. Number 18, this is this guy's third album, and what can this guy not do? I mean, he produces and writes for several TV shows, Family Guy, American Dad, and he's a great voiceover artist, and I mean, you know who I'm talking about now. His last album I wasn't hugely fond of because it had more subdued songs on it, more ballads. But this one, in full swing, and that's definitely what he is with this album. Seth MacFarlane, this is my 18th favorite album of the year. Moonlight Becomes You is a great song, one of my favorites from the era. Almost Like Being in Love is another one that's really good. But yeah, he is just one of the best modern vocalists with this classic stuff from the 30s and 40s, and just don't pass him up. I mean, a flawless voice on this guy. Number 17, this is one of several albums in this countdown that I wanted to rank higher, but there were just too many other good albums on here. And this one, it was more of the same from their debut album. This is their sophomore album, and with them, that's a good thing and a bad thing. There were not really any standout tracks on this album. There were a couple of good ones. Little of Your Love, that's one of their singles, and also You Never Know. Haim with their sophomore album Something to Tell You. That is my number. That made it to number 17 on my countdown for 2017. Number 16. I actually didn't pick up this album until right around the end of the year, and I'm kind of sorry I ignored it for so long. It's been out for about 6 months. But this was kind of like Imagine Dragons. I loved their first album. Their sophomore album kind of was a bit of a letdown, which pretty much couldn't be avoided because their first album was so spectacular. But I'm glad I second-guessed myself and picked up this album. Sacred Hearts Club by Foster the People is my number 16 favorite album of the year. SHC, which I guess you could call the title track. Static Space Lover. Several good tracks on this album. Okay, now number 15. This guy, there are a few artists this year that I had bought their first album back when it originally came out, and kind of tired of it, and ended up selling it for trade credit to the local record stores. And then didn't realize that they had put out a sophomore album until I was in the store browsing the racks. So I decided to give him a second chance, and I'm glad I did. I first heard of this guy when he performed on American Idol several years ago during the publicity junket for his debut album, and I liked him. He's one of those guys who is inspirational without being preachy, and I'm not a huge fan of hip-hop or contemporary R&B, but this guy makes it palatable. Moly Music, with his sophomore album, The Transition of Moly. That is my number 15 favorite album of the year. Still is a great ballad. That's one of the tracks on here. Gonna Be Alright is another excellent track. And each song on this album has a different texture. And that's kind of what caught my ear about it. That's what, kind of separates him from the rest of the R&B hip-hop crowd, in my opinion. So yeah, that is my number 15 favorite album of the year. This next artist, number 14, she's an Australian pop singer, and I normally don't like the pop divas, like, the Demi Lovato's and the Selena Gomez's all kind of blur together, in my opinion. But she... one of the songs from her debut album kind of went viral in a video back in 2014. And another thing I like about her is she has a couple of connections to other artists I like. Superfruit, for one, guests on this album, actually. And she actually did a duet with Troye Sivan, who's a favorite artist of mine, back on his debut album last year before. But yeah, Betty Who, with her sophomore album, The Valley, is my number 14 favorite album of the year. Some Kind of Wonderful, which is an original song. It's not one of the songs that you've heard of with that title before. That's a great song on here, and Reunion is another one, another highlight. That's number 14. Now on to lucky number 13. I seem to follow this trend with the indie rock electro pop-ish kind of acts like Foster the People and Imagine Dragons. I love these guys from the beginning, except that their album number 3 they kind of lost me on because they dipped a little bit too heavily into hip hop for my taste, and although they haven't totally left that behind, they've backed off from it quite a bit. And I've just, like I said, I've gotten to pretty much buy every one of their albums when they put one out, before I even listen to it, because I'm pretty sure I'm going to like it. The Script, with their 5th album, Freedom Child, is my number 13 favorite album. Makeup is a great song, a great message song. It's kind of has to do with inner beauty versus outer beauty, and it's a very good song. Divided States of America is very politically topical with what's been going on in the States the last year or so. But yeah, and most of the other songs on here are very much worth a listen if you haven't listened to them already. Number 12, this guy surprised me and pretty much everybody with what he did with his debut solo album. You can tell that he grew up listening to his folks' 70s and 80s records, and it was very much a change from his boy band days, and by now I'm sure you know who I'm talking about, Harry Styles, with my number 12 favorite album of the year, self-titled. Sweet Creature is a gorgeous acoustic ballad on here. Only Angel is a great rocking number. I mean, he kind of spans, runs the gamut with sounds here. And of course, Sign of the Times, the big single off the album, is another definite highlight. Number 11. Now this guy is, he's another one of these that I wanted to rank higher, but there was just so darn much good music this year. And this is one of those guys that's pretty much guaranteed to be on my list any year that he puts out an album. Well, actually, except his last one. I've been enjoying his rustic voice and his wry humor in his lyrics for probably 12 years now. But his last album didn't quite click with me. But this one, he's back in great form. Randall Bramble with his ninth album, I think, Juke Joint at the Edge of the World. That is my number 11 favorite album. Almost made the top 10 this year. Garbage Man is a great song on here. I Just Don't Have the Time. That's a great example of his humor in here. And also, if you're in a sitar mood, Moly is a great song on here. So, yeah, well, that's... okay, we're down to the top 10. This next guy here, I saw mention of his album online and kind of dismissed it when I saw the cover. You know, this young, good-looking guy, bare shoulders, seductively holding a necklace in his teeth, you know. Kind of thought, okay, here's another album of a young guy doing love songs or something like that. But then I read the review in Q magazine and realized that, once again, covers can be deceiving. Turns out this guy has a lot of substance to his lyrics. He talks about everything from corruption in the World Soccer Organization, FIFA, with regard to poverty in Brazil, all the way to trans issues with another song, transgender issues. And, of course, he does, you know, plain old love songs, too. And another thing about it is his voice is not perfect, but that's perfect for the kinds of songs that he does. And also he puts a lot of interesting twists into his songs, like sometimes some odd atonal synth kind of stuff, and it's just a great listen, much more compelling than the cover would suggest. What do you think about The Car? Declan McKenna's debut album is my number 10 favorite album of the year. Number 9, this was this guy's swan song, unfortunately. I still miss him. He passed away last year. And he still had it up until the very end. One of the pioneers of rock and roll. You all know who I'm talking about now. Chuck Berry, with his album Chuck, is number 9 on my list. And again, there's just not a bad song on here. Big Boys, Wonderful Woman. The Eyes of Man, the last song on here, is really, really compelling. One of the best songs he's ever done, in my opinion. So yeah, definitely go pick that one up if you haven't yet. It's fantastic. Number 8. Now, I have kind of a special connection to this guy, and it has to do with my sister, and I'll go into that in another video. But I don't like much country music, but this guy, he kind of makes unconventional choices when putting together a lot of his albums. And he's also got a great sense of humor, which he injects into his songs pretty liberally. For instance, Mick Jagger, John Fogerty, Timbaland all made guest appearances on this album. And yeah, I don't buy every one of his albums, but this one is very good. Love and War by Brad Paisley is my number 8 favorite album of the year. The Last Time for Everything is probably my favorite song on here, and it reminds me of my sister, and again, I'll get into that later, probably. Another great song is Selfie, that brings out his great sense of humor, and a very, very good social message in that song. Now, number 7, lucky number 7. This is yet another indie rock synthish group that I've come to enjoy. Loved their last album, as most people did. So this one was probably inevitably going to be a bit of a letdown, but still, it's got some great songs on here. What If Nothing by Walk the Moon is my number 7 favorite album. All That I Want is a great song on here. And Headphones, which a lot of people didn't like, but I kind of liked it. But yeah, I mean, not really a bad song on here. It's, as a kid who grew up in the 80s, trust me, this is one of the most authentically 80s groups out there. Again, as I said, not as good as their last album, but still excellent. Good enough to be in my top 10. Number 6, this young lady made 3rd place in American Idol several years ago, and has done quite well for herself. Thank you very much. Her first album was very good. Showed off her voice fantastically. Didn't listen to her second album though. But since then, she's done some work with Scott Bradley's Postmodern Jukebox. She's gained a bit of notoriety there. But this is her 3rd proper solo album. And it's a cover song album, but she's made some great choices, and she really makes a lot of these songs her own. Haley Reinhart with What's That Sound is my number 6 favorite album of the year. One of my favorite Mamas and the Papas songs, Words of Love. She does a great job on that. Sunny Afternoon by the Kinks, and also These Boots Are Made for Walkin' by Dusty Springfield. She does fantastically with that song. Number 5, this one, kind of like Randall Bramble, this guy will probably make my list every year that he puts out an album. And this is, oh gosh, his 13th, I think. I've loved him since the 80s when he was the frontman for Men at Work. And of course that probably gives it away who I'm talking about. But this guy's, his voice is just as great as ever, but I mean, it sounds a little bit weathered, but in my opinion, that just makes it all the more amazing to listen to. Colin Hay with Fierce Mercy. This is my number 5 favorite album of the year. Some great songs on here. 1,000 Million Reasons. Come Tumbling Down, which is track 1. That's fantastic. One bad track, though, one real misstep that he made on here, he tried to put some hip-hop into one of his songs, and it just doesn't work. If you buy this album, skip the track I'm Walking Here, because that just... yeah, I guess everybody misfires once in a while, but yeah, that one was not good. But a minor forgivable blemish on an otherwise excellent album. Colin Hay is my number 5 pick for the year. Number 4, this was on several other YouTubers' hits lists, and I was glad to see that. This is this group's 3rd album, a group from Ireland, I believe, and they've just got a great indie rock sound, and I loved their first album. It was very much early Rolling Stones, that kind of dirty blues sort of sound. Second album was good, but it kind of lost me a little bit, but they were back to form on this album. Spitting Image by The Stripes is my number 4 favorite album. Not a bad song on here, really. I mean, pick any song. It's fantastic. The only thing I didn't like about this album, and it's a real technicality, the bass was not really strong on this album. It was a little bit weak, but that's only because this album was recorded live in the studio, the whole band all at once. And which, I mean, it's a real testament to the group's musicianship, and the lead singer, I don't know his name, the lead singer's voice. I mean, he holds his voice together like a lot of other people don't when they perform live. But yeah, a very forgivable imperfection in an otherwise perfect album. Number 3, this guy was actually number 1 in my top 10 when his last album came out, and not only that, but that album ended up entrenched in my top 10 all-time favorite albums in very short order. So this album was pretty much destined to be a bit of a letdown, and it was, but it's grown on me since. Which, well, I mean, it's number 3 in my countdown, so it had to have been. This Dutch jazz pop singer, I only found out about him about 4 years ago, and bought his first 3 albums, and this was right before his 4th album came out, and that's the one that I absolutely loved, fell head over heels in love with. But this is his latest album, Amory, by Wouter Hamill. That is my number 3 favorite album of the year. Some excellent songs on here, obviously. Hey Now is a great affirmatory song about being who you are. Keep Watch is another great song. That's a ballad. But yeah, not a bad song on this album. Okay, number 2, the runner-up in my countdown. I probably shouldn't like this guy as much as I do, because he kind of reminds me of Bob Dylan in a way. Not necessarily in his voice or the way he writes his songs or something, just kind of the mood, the feel of him. I really liked his last album because it kind of took a lot of chances. He kind of stretched his wings out, and I always love it when an artist does that. But at the same time, that was the album's flaws, that it made it a little bit less cohesive. But this album I really enjoyed. It's got a texture like, when I listen to this album, I get the same feeling when I listen to an album like Tapestry by Carole King. Not so much in the way the songs are written or how timeless they are or anything, but just the feel of the album. And it's probably due to the fact that he recruited a bunch of veteran musicians, not necessarily ones that played on Carole King's album, but a group of veteran session musicians that have worked with Elvis, Dusty Springfield, Wilson Pickett, and that gave this album a texture that's just amazing. Hearts That Strain by Jake Bugg is my second favorite album of the year, and again, like the last few, not a bad song on here. Well, take your pick. My favorite is probably in the event of my demise, but yeah, How Soon the Dawn, Burn Alone. Just pick a song. You won't go wrong with that album. Just fantastic. His fourth album, by the way. Okay, number one. Here it is, number one. I don't know if it's like an unwritten rule or something with YouTube countdowns that you're not supposed to put a soundtrack or a compilation as your number one pick, but well, this is my countdown, so I'm doing it. And also, it's a double album, which kind of, you know, arguably makes the playing field a little bit unfair, but it's my favorite album that I purchased this year, or last year, hands down. It is just as much of a thrill ride as the movie itself was. And mind you, I'm not much for caper movies or car chase movies or anything, but this just transcends it all. It's just a fantastic movie, and it probably has something to do with the fact that music, namely iPods and such, are basically another character in the film. You know who I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about by now. The soundtrack from Baby Driver is my number one favorite album of the year. Just, I mean, there's a little bit of everything on here. I mean, some great instrumental soul and funk numbers from the 70s. You've got the Commodores, jazz, the Dave Brubeck Quartet on here. I mean, there's probably even a little bit of, there's a little bit of hip hop in here, possibly even a little bit of country somewhere in here. I've listened to it a few times, and it's just so amazing I can hardly remember everything that's on there. I know that sounds a little weird, but you know what I mean. So yeah, that is my my countdown for the year. I hope you all enjoyed it and found a couple of things, like I said, that maybe you didn't know about and are willing to try listening to. But yeah, 2018 is looking pretty good for music. Casey Musgraves is coming out with a new album. Troye Sivan, Charlie Puth. I'm really waiting for Charlie Puth's new album. Whole bunch of stuff is, I'm sure, coming right up around the bend. So again, thank you for watching. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Tell me what your favorite album of the year was. And thank you for watching. And remember, life's too short to be a music snob.